I never imagined that running a home-based landscaping business in suburban Phoenix, Arizona would turn into a legal nightmare. But the moment I saw Patricia Henderson from the HOA board talking to the Johnsons on my client's front lawn, I knew something was very wrong. My name is Xavier Thompson, and I had been running Thompson's Premium Landscaping for about 3 years at that point. I started the business after leaving my corporate job in marketing, tired of the endless meetings and political nonsense. Working with my hands, transforming dead yards into beautiful outdoor spaces, actually meant something to me. The business had grown steadily through word of mouth, and by early 2025, I had a solid client base in the Sunset Ridge community, where I also happened to live. Sunset Ridge was one of those planned communities that looked perfect on paper. Manicured lawns, uniform mailboxes, strict guidelines about everything from paint colors to the height of your grass. The HOA was run by a board of 5 people, but everyone knew Patricia Henderson was the real power. She was in her late 40s, always dressed like she was about to attend a country club luncheon, and had that particular brand of authority that came from having too much time and too much interest in other people's business. I had my first run-in with Patricia about 6 months after I moved into Sunset Ridge. She had knocked on my door on a Saturday morning, clipboard in hand, to inform me that my work truck was in violation of the community guidelines. According to her, commercial vehicles were not permitted to be parked in driveways overnight. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sure you understand that we have standards to maintain," she had said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Your truck is an eyesore and several neighbors have complained." I had looked past her at the empty street. It was 7 in the morning. Which neighbors? I'm not at liberty to say. Privacy concerns, you understand. I had moved the truck to park on the street, technically outside HOA jurisdiction, but that had only been the beginning. Over the next few months, I received violation notices for leaving my ladder visible in my backyard, for having a small pile of mulch bags near my garage for more than 24 hours, and for supposedly running a business that created excessive traffic in the neighborhood. That last one was ridiculous since most of my clients were in the community itself, and I typically worked at their properties, not mine. But I played by the rules. I got proper business licenses from the city of Phoenix, obtained liability insurance, and made sure all my equipment was stored properly. I even went through the hassle of getting certified by the Arizona Registrar of Contractors for landscaping services, even though for the type of work I did primarily maintenance and design rather than major construction, it was not strictly required. I wanted everything to be completely above board. The real trouble started on a Wednesday afternoon in February. I was finishing up a consultation with the Johnsons, a retired couple who lived 3 streets over from me. They wanted to redo their entire backyard, convert it from a water-hungry grass lawn to a desert-friendly xeriscaped garden with native plants. It was exactly the kind of project I loved, and we were standing in their backyard discussing placement for some beautiful red yucca plants when I saw Patricia walking across their side yard toward us. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I'm so glad I caught you," Patricia called out, waving her hand. She was wearing white capri pants and a navy blue blazer, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose. The Johnsons looked at each other, confused. "Patricia, hello. We are in the middle of a consultation right now," Mr. Johnson said. Patricia did not slow down. She walked right up to us, positioning herself between me and the Johnsons. "That's actually why I'm here. I couldn't in good conscience let this continue without saying something." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me." She turned to face me, and I could see the satisfied expression on her face even behind those sunglasses. Mr. Thompson, I've been doing my due diligence as HOA president. It's my responsibility to protect the homeowners in this community. Patricia, what are you talking about, Mrs. Johnson asked, her voice sharp with irritation. I've checked with the proper authorities, and Mr. Thompson here is running an unlicensed business. He has no legal right to be operating as a contractor in Arizona. I would hate for you folks to hire him, pay him your hard-earned money, and then find out that any work he does would not be covered by proper licensing or insurance. If something went wrong, you would have no recourse. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's not true. That's completely false. I have documentation, Patricia said smoothly, pulling a piece of paper from her clipboard. I called the Arizona Registrar of Contractors myself. There's no license on file for Thompson's Premium Landscaping. Mr. Johnson took the paper from her, frowning as he read it. I felt my face getting hot, a mixture of anger and panic flooding through me. Let me see that, I said, reaching for the paper. Mr. Johnson handed it to me and I scanned it quickly. It was a printout from the ROC website, showing a search result for my business name with no results found at the bottom. This is wrong, I said. I have my license. It's under my name, Xavier Thompson, not the business name. That's how I registered it. Patricia made a dismissive sound. That's a convenient excuse. The Johnsons, I really think you should reconsider this arrangement. There are several fully licensed, reputable companies that service our area. I can give you some recommendations, Mrs. Johnson looked at me with uncertainty now, and I could see 3 years of building my reputation starting to crumble in real time. I can show you my license right now, I said, pulling out my phone. I have a photo of it in my files. I also have my business license from the city, my insurance papers, everything. Digital photos can be edited, Patricia said. I'm just looking out for the community. You're spreading lies about my business, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I don't know what your problem is with me, but this is defamation. It's only defamation if it's false, Mr. Thompson. I'm simply sharing information that I obtained from official sources. She turned back to the Johnsons. I'll leave you folks to make your own decision, but I've done my duty in warning you. There's an HOA board meeting next Tuesday if you have any questions about approved contractors. She walked away, and I stood there with my phone in my hand, feeling completely helpless. The Johnsons looked uncomfortable, and Mr. Johnson cleared his throat. Xavier, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding, but maybe we should take some time to think about this project. Get all the facts straight. Please, let me show you my documentation right now, I said, but I could see in their faces that the damage was done. Patricia had planted the seed of doubt, and nothing I said in that moment was going to fix it. We will give you a call, Mrs. Johnson said, but her tone made it clear that call was never coming. I drove home in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. When I got back to my house, I immediately went to my home office and pulled out my filing cabinet. Everything was there. My ROC license, valid through 2026. My city business license. My liability insurance policy with a $2 million coverage limit. Every single piece of documentation that proved I was running a legitimate, legal business. I took photos of everything, then sat down at my computer and started making calls. First, I called the Arizona Registrar of Contractors directly. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got someone who could help me. Yes, Mr. Thompson, I see your license here in our system, the woman on the phone said. Licensed since August 2022, current and in good standing. Is there a problem? Someone did a search for my business and claimed I wasn't licensed. They printed out a page saying no results found. Oh, well, if they searched by business name instead of licensee name, that could happen. Your license is under your personal name. Did you register a DBA? I did, but I guess it's not linked in your search system. Not automatically, no, but your license is valid. If someone has questions, they can call us to verify using your license number. I thanked her and hung up, then immediately called my insurance company to verify my policy was active. It was. Everything was in order, exactly as it should be. That evening, I drafted an email to Patricia Henderson and the entire HOA board. I attached copies of all my licenses and insurance documents, explained that her information was false, and requested a formal retraction and apology. I kept the tone professional, even though what I really wanted to do was tell her exactly what I thought of her. The response came the next morning, but it was not what I hoped for. Patricia replied to just me, not the whole board. Mr. Thompson, I stand by my statement. I conducted a search using publicly available information, and the results showed no license under your business name. If you have since obtained proper licensing, that's wonderful, but my warning to the Johnsons was based on accurate information at the time. I have no intention of issuing a retraction. Perhaps this will serve as a reminder to ensure all your business documentation is properly filed and easily verifiable. Regards, Patricia Henderson, HOA President. I read the email 3 times, my anger building with each pass. She was doubling down, twisting the facts to cover herself while still implying I had done something wrong. Over the next week, I started noticing the impact of Patricia's interference. I had consultations scheduled with 2 other families in Sunset Ridge, and both canceled via text with vague excuses. Then, I ran into Margaret Chen at the grocery store. Margaret had been one of my first clients in the neighborhood, and I had done her front yard landscaping 2 years ago. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me. "Xavier, hi," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Hey Margaret, how's the garden holding up?" "Good, good. Listen, I heard some things and I just wanted to ask. You are licensed, right? Like properly licensed?" My heart sank. "Yes, absolutely. I have all my licenses and insurance. Did Patricia tell you I didn't?" Margaret shifted her shopping basket from one arm to the other. "She mentioned it at the last HOA meeting. Said we all needed to be careful about unlicensed contractors working in the neighborhood. She didn't say your name specifically, but everyone knew who she meant." "She what?" "I'm sorry, Xavier. I told people I was sure it was just a misunderstanding. You did great work for us." I thanked Margaret and finished my shopping in a fog. Patricia had not just interfered with one client. She had announced it at an HOA meeting, spreading her false claims to the entire community. My business was not just based in Sunset Ridge, it depended on it. About 70% of my clients lived in this neighborhood, and word of mouth here had been the foundation of my growth. That weekend, I sat down with my laptop and started researching defamation law in Arizona. I was not a lawyer, but I needed to understand what my options were. What I learned was both encouraging and daunting. Arizona law did recognize defamation, which included both slander-spoken false statements and libel-written false statements. To prove defamation, I needed to show that Patricia had made false statements, that she had communicated those statements to third parties, that she had done so with at least negligence regarding the truth, and that I had suffered actual damages as a result. The false statements were clear. I was licensed, and she had claimed I was not. She had definitely communicated this to third parties, both directly to the Johnsons and at the HOA meeting. As for damages, I started documenting everything. The Johnson project would have been worth about $8,000. The two canceled consultations might have led to projects worth another $10,000 to $12,000 combined. Plus, there was the broader damage to my reputation in the community, which was harder to quantify but very real. On Monday morning, I called a lawyer. I found Amanda Rodriguez through an online search, a local attorney who specialized in business law and defamation cases. Her office was in Scottsdale, about a 20-minute drive from my house. She agreed to meet with me that afternoon. Amanda's office was in a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows and abstract art on the walls. She was probably in her mid-30s, professionally dressed in a gray suit, and she had the kind of direct, no-nonsense manner that immediately put me at ease. "Tell me everything," she said after we exchanged introductions, and I did. I walked her through the whole timeline, from my initial conflicts with Patricia over parking my truck, to the incident with the Johnsons, to the HOA meeting where she had spread the claims more broadly. I showed her all my documentation proving I was properly licensed and insured, and I showed her Patricia's email response where she refused to retract her statements. Amanda took notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and tapped her pen against the pad. "This is a solid defamation case," she said. "The facts are on your side. You can prove the statements were false. You can prove they were communicated to third parties causing damage to your business, and her refusal to retract even after you provided proof of your licensing shows at least negligence, possibly actual malice. What's the difference? Negligence means she should have known better, that a reasonable person would have done more to verify the information before spreading it. Actual malice means she either knew it was false or showed reckless disregard for the truth. Actual malice is a higher standard, usually required for public figures, but it can strengthen your case and potentially open the door to punitive damages. "I just want her to stop lying about my business," I said, "and I want people to know the truth." That's what a lawsuit would accomplish. We would file a complaint, and she would be legally required to respond. We could seek damages for your lost business, demand a retraction, and possibly get an injunction preventing her from making further false statements. How much would this cost me? Amanda named a retainer figure that made me wince, but she also explained that if we won, we might be able to recover attorney's fees depending on how the case proceeded. We discussed it for another 30 minutes, and I told her I needed a day to think about it. That night, I barely slept. Filing a lawsuit felt like a huge escalation, but the alternative was letting Patricia destroy the business I had built. I thought about just moving, finding a new neighborhood, starting over. But why should I have to do that? I had not done anything wrong. I had followed every rule, obtained every license, done everything by the book. Patricia was the one who had lied. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Amanda and told her to move forward with the lawsuit. Over the next 2 weeks, Amanda prepared the complaint. She was thorough, documenting every false statement, every communication to third parties, and calculating my damages. We decided to sue Patricia personally rather than the HOA, since she had acted on her own in making these statements. The complaint sought $50,000 in compensatory damages for lost business and harm to reputation, plus punitive damages to be determined at trial. The lawsuit was filed on March 5, 2025, in Maricopa County Superior Court. Patricia was served with the papers 3 days later, and according to Amanda, she had 30 days to respond. I was not prepared for how fast things would move after that. 2 days after Patricia was served, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. It was a formal violation notice, claiming that I was running a business that created excessive noise and traffic, and that I had commercial equipment visible from the street. The notice demanded I cease operations immediately or face fines of $200 per day. I took photos of my property. My equipment was in my garage, not visible from the street. I worked from clients' properties, not my home, so there was no traffic. The noise claim was absurd. I called Amanda immediately. "This is retaliation," she said after I read her the notice. "And it's actually good for our case. It shows that Patricia is acting with malice, targeting you because of the lawsuit. Save that notice. Document everything." The violations kept coming. Over the next week, I received notices for having my trash cans visible for more than 12 hours after pickup, for a small oil stain on my driveway, and for having a bush in my front yard that was allegedly 2 inches taller than HOA regulations allowed. Each notice threatened fines and legal action. I took photos of my neighbors' properties, documenting that at least 5 other homes had similar or worse violations that the HOA had never mentioned. Trash cans left out for days, larger bushes, visible equipment and toys in yards. The selective enforcement was obvious. Meanwhile, the damage to my business continued. Another client called to cancel a maintenance contract, apologetically explaining that Patricia had mentioned concerns about my licensing at a neighborhood coffee morning. I was losing about $3,000 a month in revenue, and my savings were draining fast between the legal fees and the lost income. Amanda filed an amended complaint, adding the retaliation claims and increasing the damages sought. She also filed a motion for a preliminary injunction, asking the court to order Patricia and the HOA to stop making false statements about my business while the case proceeded. The hearing for the preliminary injunction was scheduled for early April. In the meantime, Patricia filed her response to the lawsuit. Her lawyer argued that her statements were protected opinion, that she had relied on publicly available information, and that any damages I claimed were speculative. The response also included a counterclaim, alleging that I was harassing Patricia and that my lawsuit was frivolous, and intended to silence her legitimate concerns about community safety. "The counterclaim is garbage," Amanda told me over the phone. "It's a slap-suit tactic, trying to intimidate you into dropping the case. Arizona has anti-slap protections, and we will move to dismiss it." The preliminary injunction hearing was held on April 9th. It was my first time in a real courtroom, and I was nervous despite Amanda's assurances that this was routine. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal, with the judge's bench elevated above everything else. Judge Michael Torres presided, a stern-looking man in his 60s with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. Patricia was there with her lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Derek Paulson. Patricia wore a conservative dress and had her hair pulled back, looking every inch the responsible community leader rather than the vindictive busybody I knew her to be. Amanda presented our case first, walking through the evidence of Patricia's false statements and the ongoing harm to my business. She had prepared exhibits, everything from my license documentation to screenshots of canceled client emails to a chart showing my revenue decline since February. She also presented evidence of the retaliatory HOA violations. "Your Honor, Mr. Thompson has suffered immediate and ongoing harm to his business reputation and income as a direct result of Ms. Henderson's false and defamatory statements," Amanda argued. "The evidence clearly shows that he is properly licensed and insured, yet Ms. Henderson continues to imply otherwise, both directly and through her position in the HOA. A preliminary injunction is necessary to prevent further irreparable harm while this case proceeds. Paulson argued that Patricia had a First Amendment right to express concerns about contractors in the community, that she had relied on a good faith search of public records, and that an injunction would constitute prior restraint on her speech. Miss Henderson is the HOA president, Your Honor. She has a responsibility to the homeowners in her community. The fact that Mr. Thompson's licensing information was not easily findable in the public database is not her fault. She has a right to share information that she reasonably believes to be true. Judge Torres asked several pointed questions, particularly focusing on whether Patricia had made any effort to verify the information after I had provided her with documentation of my licenses. Miss Henderson received copies of Mr. Thompson's license, insurance, and other documentation in February, correct? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, Paulson admitted. And did she issue any kind of correction or retraction after receiving that information? She responded that her initial statement was based on information available at the time, Your Honor. That's not what I asked. Did she issue a correction stating that Mr. Thompson is, in fact, properly licensed? Paulson hesitated. Not in those exact words, Your Honor. In any words, Counselor. She maintained that her initial statement was accurate based on the information available at the time of her search. Judge Torres made a note on his pad, his expression unreadable. After both sides finished their arguments, he announced he would issue a ruling within 3 days. Those 3 days felt like forever. I kept working, taking on jobs outside Sunset Ridge to make up for the lost local business. I drove to Temp, to Mesa, to other neighborhoods across Phoenix. The work was good, but I missed the convenience of working in my own community, and I resented every extra mile I had to drive because of Patricia's lies. The ruling came through on April 12th, and Amanda called me immediately. We won, she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Judge Torres granted the preliminary injunction. Patricia and the HOA are ordered to cease making any statements claiming or implying that you are unlicensed or uninsured. They are also ordered to issue a correction at the next HOA meeting and in the community newsletter stating that you are properly licensed. And the judge included language prohibiting further retaliatory enforcement actions. I sat down hard on my couch, a wave of relief washing over me. Seriously. Seriously. The judge's order is very clear. He found that you demonstrated a likelihood of success on the merits of your defamation claim, that you would suffer irreparable harm without an injunction, and that the balance of equities favored granting the injunction. He specifically noted that once Miss Henderson received proof of your licensing, she had an obligation to correct her earlier statements and failed to do so. What happens now? Now we move forward with the full case. Discovery, depositions, and eventually trial unless they want to settle. But this is a strong signal that the court sees the merit in your claims. The correction was issued at the HOA meeting the following Tuesday. I did not attend, but several neighbors who had been supportive reached out to tell me about it. According to them, Patricia read a brief statement, clearly prepared by her lawyer, stating that Thompson's Premium Landscaping was properly licensed and insured by the state of Arizona and the city of Phoenix, and that any previous statements to the contrary were based on incomplete information. She apparently read it in a monotone voice and immediately moved on to other business. The same correction appeared in the community newsletter, buried on page 3 in small print. It was the bare minimum compliance with the court order, but it was something. The impact was not immediate, but gradually clients started reaching back out. The Johnsons called to apologize and ask if I would still be willing to do their backyard project. Margaret Chen recommended me to her sister who lived 2 neighborhoods over. My calendar started filling up again. But the lawsuit was far from over. Discovery began in May, which meant both sides had to turn over documents and answer written questions called interrogatories. Amanda requested all emails, texts, and documents related to Patricia's statements about my business. She also requested records of HOA meetings, violation notices issued to me versus other homeowners, and communications between Patricia and other board members. What came back was damning. In emails to other board members, Patricia had referred to me as that unlicensed landscaper multiple times, even after receiving my documentation. She had discussed strategies to get rid of me from the neighborhood. One email, sent to another board member named Susan Wright, read, "We need to find a way to shut down Thompson's operation. He is running a business in a residential zone, and the constant traffic is unacceptable. I have already warned several potential clients about his lack of proper licensing. Hopefully, he will get the message and move somewhere more appropriate." That email was sent 3 days after I had provided Patricia with copies of my licenses. Amanda practically danced when she showed it to me. "This is actual malice," she said. She knew your licensing claims were valid, and she kept spreading false information anyway with the explicit intent of damaging your business. This takes us from simple negligence to intentional defamation, and it opens up the possibility of significant punitive damages. The discovery also revealed that I was not the only person Patricia had targeted. There were emails discussing another homeowner who ran a small online business from home, and complaints about a resident who gave piano lessons. Patricia seemed to have a vendetta against anyone who dared to work from home, regardless of whether they were following the rules. Depositions were scheduled for June. A deposition is like a formal interview under oath, where lawyers from both sides ask questions and a court reporter records everything. I was deposed first, in a conference room at Paulson's law firm. It was intimidating, sitting across from Patricia's lawyer while he tried to poke holes in my story, but Amanda had prepared me well. Paulson asked about every interaction I had ever had with Patricia, trying to paint me as someone with a grudge who was exaggerating the impact of her statements. He asked detailed questions about my business finances, trying to argue that any revenue decline could be attributed to normal business fluctuations rather than Patricia's defamation. "Is it not true, Mr. Thompson, that landscape businesses typically see seasonal variations in revenue?" he asked. "Yes, but this was not a seasonal variation. I lost specific clients who specifically mentioned concerns about licensing that came directly from Miss Henderson. Can you prove that those clients would have hired you otherwise? They had already scheduled consultations. They were ready to move forward until Miss Henderson interfered. It went on for 4 hours, but I held my ground. Amanda looked pleased when we left. Patricia's deposition was 2 weeks later, and this time I was allowed to be present. Watching Amanda question her was one of the most satisfying experiences of my life. Amanda started with Patricia's background and her role in the HOA, establishing her position of authority and influence in the community. Then she moved to the search she had conducted. "Miss Henderson, when you searched the Arizona Registrar of Contractors database, what exactly did you type into the search field?" The business name, "Thompson's Premium Landscaping." "And when the search returned no results, did you try searching by the individual's name?" "No." "Did you call the Registrar of Contractors to inquire whether there might be a license under a different name?" "No, I relied on the public database." "Did you ask Mr. Thompson if he had a license before approaching the Johnsons?" Patricia hesitated. "I do not believe so." You went directly to his clients to warn them that he was unlicensed without ever asking him if he had a license. I was acting on the information I had. Miss Henderson, after Mr. Thompson provided you with copies of his license, his business permits, and his insurance documentation, did you contact the Johnsons to let them know he was actually properly licensed? I may have mentioned it. You may have. Do you have any record of contacting them? No. Did you send an email, make a phone call, anything to correct the false information you had given them? I stood by my initial statement. It was accurate at the time I made it. But it was not accurate. Mr. Thompson had been licensed since 2022, years before you made your statement. The only thing that was inaccurate was your search methodology. Correct, Paulson objected, but Amanda had made her point. She then pulled up the emails, asking Patricia to explain each one. Miss Henderson, this email to Susan Wright is dated February 20th, 2025. That is 5 days after Mr. Thompson sent you his licensing documentation. Can you read the highlighted portion for the record? Patricia's face tightened. I have already warned several potential clients about his lack of proper licensing. At the time you sent this email, you had already seen proof that Mr. Thompson was licensed, correct? Yes, but I question the validity. Did you take any steps to verify the validity? Call the number on the license. Check the license number with the registrar? No. So you questioned the validity without any basis, and you continued telling people he was unlicensed. I had concerns. Based on what, Miss Henderson? Patricia did not have a good answer for that. The deposition continued for another 3 hours, and by the end, Patricia looked exhausted and angry. Her lawyer did his best to rehabilitate her testimony, but the damage was clear. In July, Paulson reached out to Amanda about settlement discussions. He proposed that Patricia would issue a more comprehensive public retraction, and in exchange, I would drop the lawsuit with no money changing hands. Not a chance, I told Amanda. This is not about a retraction anymore. She deliberately tried to destroy my business even after she knew she was lying. I want her to face real consequences. Amanda negotiated back and forth with Paulson over several weeks. The settlement offers gradually increased. Paulson offered $5,000, then $10,000, then $25,000. Each time I said no. This was not about the money, though I certainly needed it after the legal fees and lost revenue. It was about accountability. They are scared, Amanda told me during one of our strategy sessions. The evidence is overwhelming and they know it. If this goes to trial, you are going to win, and the damages could be much higher than what they are offering, especially with punitive damages on the table. In August, we had a settlement conference with a judge mediating. It was not Judge Torres, but another judge assigned specifically to help the parties reach a settlement. We all sat in a conference room at the courthouse, Patricia and Paulson on one side, Amanda and me on the other, with Judge Rachel Kim at the head of the table. Judge Kim had reviewed the case file, and she made it clear from the start that she thought I had a strong case. Miss Henderson, I have to be frank with you, Judge Kim said. The evidence here is quite damaging. The emails in particular show a pattern of behavior that goes beyond simple negligence. If this case goes to trial, you are facing significant exposure, potentially 6 figures when you account for compensatory damages, punitive damages, and attorney's fees. Patricia's face went pale. 6 figures, very possibly. Mr. Thompson has documented substantial harm to his business, and the evidence suggests you acted with actual malice. That opens the door to punitive damages, which are designed to punish particularly egregious behavior. Arizona juries do not look kindly on intentional efforts to destroy someone's livelihood. We went through several rounds of negotiation, with Judge Kim shuttling between rooms to talk to each side privately. Paulson eventually came back with an offer of $75,000, a full retraction and apology to be published prominently in the HOA newsletter and posted on the community website, and Patricia's resignation from the HOA board. They will also agree to pay your attorney's fees, Amanda added, showing me the written offer. That is another $40,000 or so at this point. I sat with the offer for a long moment. It was more money than I had ever had in my bank account at one time. It would cover all my legal expenses, replace my lost revenue, and give me a cushion to grow the business. The public apology and Patricia's resignation would restore my reputation. It was a good offer. But I thought about those emails, about Patricia knowingly spreading lies about me even after she knew the truth. I thought about the stress of the past 6 months, the sleepless nights, the anxiety every time my phone rang with another client cancellation. What are our chances at trial? I asked Amanda. Very good. Probably 80% or better that we win on liability. The damages are the only question, but I think we could get a verdict for at least $100,000 in compensatory damages, possibly more. Punitive damages are harder to predict, but given the egregiousness of her conduct, I could see a jury awarding 2 or 3 times the compensatory amount. I looked through the glass partition at Patricia, who was talking animatedly with her lawyer. She looked stressed and angry, but I did not see any real remorse. Counter at $125,000 plus attorney's fees, the full apology and retraction, and her resignation, I said. And I want the apology to be specific. Not just that she made an error, but that she made false statements that damaged my business, and that she continued to make those statements even after being presented with evidence that they were false. Amanda smiled. I will see what I can do. The negotiation continued for another hour. Paulson argued that $125,000 was excessive, that Patricia did not have that kind of money. Amanda pointed out that Patricia lived in a house worth over $600,000 and drove a BMW, suggesting she could find the money if she really wanted to avoid a trial. We eventually settled at $110,000 plus attorney's fees, the detailed apology I had requested, and Patricia's resignation from the HOA board effective immediately. Patricia looked like she wanted to cry as she signed the settlement agreement, but I felt only relief. The apology was published in the September issue of the HOA newsletter, on the front page in large print. It read, I, Patricia Henderson, former president of the Sunset Ridge HOA, wish to publicly apologize to Xavier Thompson of Thompson's Premium Landscaping. In February of 2025, I made statements to members of this community claiming that Mr. Thompson was operating an unlicensed business. These statements were false. Mr. Thompson is and has been properly licensed by the Arizona Registrar of Contractors, the City of Phoenix, and carries full liability insurance. I continued to make or imply these false statements even after Mr. Thompson provided me with documentation proving his licensing. My statements were defamatory and caused harm to Mr. Thompson's business and reputation. I deeply regret my actions and the damage I caused. Mr. Thompson operates a legitimate, professional business, and I recommend him without reservation to anyone in need of landscaping services. The same apology was posted on the community website, in the neighborhood Facebook group, and mailed to every household in Sunset Ridge. The response from the community was overwhelmingly supportive. I got calls, emails, and text messages from neighbors apologizing for believing Patricia's lies and asking if I was taking on new clients. The settlement money came through in October, minus Amanda's fees and the costs of litigation. I ended up with about $95,000 after everything was paid. It was enough to buy a second truck, hire an assistant, and expand the business beyond just Sunset Ridge. I was no longer dependent on one neighborhood, one community, or one person's opinion. Patricia moved out of Sunset Ridge in November. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that her husband, who had stayed mostly silent throughout the entire ordeal, was embarrassed by the whole situation and wanted a fresh start. They bought a house in Chandler, about 30 minutes away. The new HOA president was a guy named Tom Simmons, a retired engineer who ran the board meetings efficiently and seemed to have no interest in petty neighborhood drama. The HOA left me alone after that. My business grew steadily. The publicity from the lawsuit, ironically, ended up being good marketing. An article in the local Phoenix newspaper covered the story, framing it as a small business owner standing up to HOA overreach. I got calls from potential clients across the entire Phoenix metro area, many of whom specifically mentioned they had read about the case and respected that I had fought back. By early 2026, I had 2 full-time employees, 3 trucks, and more work than I could handle. I was bidding on commercial projects, designing landscapes for new housing developments, and even consulting on sustainable desert landscaping for the city of Phoenix. Thompson's Premium Landscaping had become exactly what I had hoped it would be when I started it 3 years earlier, a thriving business built on quality work and solid reputation. I still lived in Sunset Ridge, though I had considered moving after everything that happened. In the end, I decided to stay. It was my home, I had friends and clients there, and I was not going to let Patricia chase me away. My grass was always exactly at regulation height, my trash cans were never left out longer than allowed, and my equipment stayed neatly stored in my garage. I followed every HOA rule to the letter, not because I was afraid of them, but because I refused to give them any legitimate reason to complain. On a Saturday morning in February 2026, exactly 1 year after Patricia had confronted me at the Johnsons' house, I was finishing up the installation of a beautiful xeriscaped front yard for a new client in Sunset Ridge. It had river rock pathways winding between native plants, red yucca and penstemon providing pops of color, and a beautiful ocotillo as the centerpiece. The client, a young couple who had just moved in, stood admiring the transformation of their formerly bland grass lawn. "Xavier, this is incredible," the wife said. "It is exactly what we wanted." "I am glad you are happy with it," I said, packing up my tools. "Remember, the plants will take a few weeks to really establish, but they should thrive with minimal water once they are settled." As I was loading the last of the equipment into my truck, a car pulled up across the street. An older woman got out, looking at the landscaping I had just finished. She walked over with a friendly smile. "Excuse me, did you do this yard? It is gorgeous." "Yes, madam, thank you." "I am 3 houses down, and I have been thinking about redoing my front yard. Would you have time to give me a consultation?" I pulled out one of my business cards, the professional ones I had printed after the settlement came through. They had my name, my license number prominently displayed, and testimonials on the back from satisfied clients. "I would be happy to. Give me a call and we will set up a time." She took the card, studied it for a moment, then looked up at me with recognition in her eyes. "Thompson's Premium Landscaping. Wait, you are the one who sued Patricia Henderson, right? Here we go," I thought, preparing for whatever was coming next, but the woman grinned. "Good for you. That woman was unbearable. I am so glad someone finally stood up to her, and this work is beautiful. I will definitely call you." As I drove home that afternoon, windows down in the mild February weather, I thought about how far things had come in a year. Patricia's lies had nearly destroyed my business, but in fighting back, I had actually made it stronger. I had learned about defamation law, about the legal system, about the importance of documentation and standing up for yourself when someone tries to tear you down. The lawsuit was over, the settlement was paid, and my business was thriving. Patricia was gone from the neighborhood and from the HOA, facing the consequences of her actions. Justice, in the end, had been served. I pulled into my driveway, parking my truck on the street as I always did, just to be safe. My house looked good, the front yard that I had landscaped myself, showcasing the same desert-adapted plants I recommended to clients. As I walked to my front door, I noticed my neighbor Jim waving from his yard next door. "Hey, Xavier, got a minute?" he called. I walked over and Jim showed me his sprinkler system, which had developed a leak. "I know you do landscaping, not plumbing, but I thought you might know someone who could fix this without charging me an arm and a leg." "Actually, I can probably handle that," I said, examining the connection. "It is just a loose fitting. Give me 5 minutes and I will grab my tools." As I fixed Jim's sprinkler system, we talked about the neighborhood, about the upcoming HOA meeting where they were voting on new board members, about his daughter who was graduating from ASU in May. It was normal, neighborly conversation, the kind of interaction I had always hoped to have in this community. No drama, no accusations, no one trying to sabotage anyone else, just people living their lives and helping each other out. That evening, I sat on my back patio with a beer, watching the sun set over the Arizona desert. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the mountains in the distance silhouetted against the fading light. I thought about calling my parents, who lived back in Ohio and who had been worried sick throughout the entire lawsuit. I thought about how I would tell them that everything had worked out, that their son, who had left his corporate job to start a landscaping business, had not just survived a targeted attack on his livelihood, but had come out stronger on the other side. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the Johnsons, the couple whose consultation Patricia had interrupted a year ago. The subject line read, "Backyard Project." I opened it. "Xavier, our backyard project is complete and we absolutely love it. We wanted to send you some photos and thank you again for your patience with us last year. We should have trusted you from the beginning. If you are willing, we would love to use you as a reference for anyone who asks. Attached are some pictures we thought you might want to use for your portfolio. Best, Robert and Linda Johnson." The photos showed the transformation of their backyard from a water-hungry grass lawn to a stunning desert garden. Red yucca plants bloomed with tall spikes of coral-colored flowers. Desert marigolds provided splashes of yellow. A winding path of decomposed granite led to a small seating area surrounded by native shrubs. It was exactly the kind of work that made me love this business. I replied to their email, thanking them for the kind words and the photos, and yes, I would be honored if they served as a reference. Then I forwarded the photos to Amanda Rodriguez with a note. "Thought you might like to see what all that legal work helped protect. Thank you again for everything." She replied within minutes. "Beautiful work, Xavier. You earned this success. Proud to have represented you. Let me know if Patricia ever bothers you again, but I doubt she will." I smiled at that. No, I did not think Patricia would bother me again. She had learned an expensive lesson about the consequences of defamation, about the damage that lies can do, and about what happens when someone decides to fight back instead of just accepting the injustice. The HOA drama was over. My business was thriving. My reputation was restored and actually stronger than it had been before. Life was good. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, I raised my beer in a silent toast. To justice, to perseverance, to the power of standing up for yourself, and to the future, which suddenly looked brighter than it had in a very long time. The next morning, I woke up early as usual and checked my calendar. I had 3 consultations scheduled for the week, 2 maintenance jobs, and the final walkthrough on a major installation in Scottsdale. My assistant, Marcus, would be handling some of the routine maintenance work, freeing me up to focus on design consultations and new projects. We had developed a good rhythm, and I was already thinking about hiring a second assistant to keep up with demand. At the first consultation of the day, a couple in their 60s showed me their backyard and described their vision for a low-maintenance garden where they could entertain grandchildren. As we talked through options, the husband mentioned that he had heard about me from a friend. "She said you were the guy who stood up to the HOA," he said. "Anyone willing to fight for what is right has my business." I thanked him, though part of me hoped that eventually I would be known just for the quality of my work rather than for the lawsuit. But I also understood that the story resonated with people. Everyone who had ever dealt with an overzealous HOA, an unfair authority figure, or someone spreading lies about them, could relate to what I had been through. The fact that I had fought back, and one gave people hope that justice was possible. Over the following months, I continued to build the business. I joined the Phoenix Landscape Contractors Association, networked with other professionals, and took continuing education courses on sustainable desert landscaping techniques. The lawsuit had taught me the importance of maintaining impeccable documentation, so I kept detailed records of every project, every client interaction, and every license renewal. I would never again be vulnerable to claims that I was not properly credentialed. In the Sunset Ridge community, life moved on. The new HOA board was functional and reasonable, focusing on genuine community needs rather than petty enforcement. The neighborhood newsletter featured articles about water conservation, community events, and local business spotlights. In April, they did a spotlight on Thompson's Premium Landscaping, featuring photos of several yards I had designed in the neighborhood and interviewing clients about their satisfaction with my work. I framed that newsletter article and hung it in my home office, right next to my business license and my ROC certification. It was a reminder of how far things had come, of how persistence and standing up for what is right can turn even the worst situations around. By the summer of 2026, I was employing 4 people and had expanded into hardscaping projects, building patios, retaining walls, and outdoor kitchens in addition to the planting and design work. The business I had started as a one-man operation 3 years earlier had become a legitimate company with a reputation for quality work, fair prices, and professional conduct. I never saw Patricia Henderson again. I heard occasional updates through the neighborhood grapevine that she was living in Chandler, that she had stayed off the HOA board there, that she kept to herself. I hoped she had learned something from the experience, though I honestly did not spend much time thinking about her. She was a chapter of my life that had closed, a challenge I had faced and overcome. The real lesson from the whole ordeal was not about Patricia or HOAs or defamation law, though I certainly learned plenty about all of those things. The real lesson was about the importance of standing up for yourself, of not accepting lies and injustice just because fighting back seems hard or expensive or risky. I could have let Patricia's defamation slide, could have just moved to a different neighborhood or tried to rebuild my business elsewhere. But by choosing to fight, by holding her accountable for the harm she caused. I had not only protected my business but sent a message that such behavior has consequences. As I sat in my office one evening, reviewing proposals for upcoming projects, I realized that I was grateful for the experience, as painful as it had been. It had forced me to become more professional, more meticulous, more confident in standing up for myself. It had shown me that the legal system, for all its flaws and expenses, could actually deliver justice when you had the facts on your side. And it had connected me with clients who valued integrity and fairness, who wanted to work with someone they could trust. Thompson's Premium Landscaping was more than just a business now. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of truth over lies, and to what is possible when you refuse to let someone else define your story. Patricia had tried to destroy my reputation with false claims about licensing. In the end, my business was stronger than ever, while she had lost her position, her reputation, and over $100,000. Justice, I had learned, is not always swift. It is not always easy. But when you have truth on your side and the courage to fight for it, justice is possible. And that was a lesson worth every dollar, every sleepless night, and every moment of stress the lawsuit had cost me. The desert sunset painted my office walls in shades of gold and amber as I closed my laptop for the day. Tomorrow would bring new clients, new projects, new opportunities. The past was settled. The future was bright. And I was exactly where I wanted to be, running a successful business, living in a community I loved, and knowing that I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. That was enough.